Welcome, everyone. I'm Byron Tate, editor of the Pine Bluff Commercial. This is another special segment of the Newsroom. We are interviewing mayoral candidates this week and next week, and today we have Vivian Flowers, actually State Representative Vivian Flowers for a while longer. Welcome. Thank you for
Thank you. Glad to be here.
doing this. Tell us a little about yourself.
Okay.
Like, what do you do? Like, some other candidates are a little more of an open book, but
Yeah. I am a state representative. I have been for 9 years. I'm actually in my 10th year. And it has been a roller coaster ride in many ways, but definitely the honor of my life to serve the people of District 65. And prior to the census, District 17, which was most of Pine Bluff, or majority of Pine Bluff, and now it's about even. And
even Pine Bluff and
even Pine Bluff, and then part of Jefferson County, and a tiny part of Arkansas County. So it includes Alzheimer, Humphrey, Wabaseka, and Sherrill, Jefferson, and then a tiny part of Humphrey in another county.
just part of Humphrey.
Just a little tiny slither.
I would think if you got any of Humphrey, you'd probably get it all. You know?
Yeah. Well, no, I have all of Humphrey, but some of Humphrey, and who knew, some of Humphrey is in
right.
Jefferson County, and
right.
some of it is in Arkansas County. Yeah.
That was poor planning in the day, I guess.
I'm going to tell you, it has been interesting because I've learned a lot about water.
Oh, yeah.
Many of our small towns have major water issues, whether it's drinking water or wastewater, and also they have issues with animal control, and that's one thing that I think when we in the city of Pine Bluff, when we think about and look at how to solve problems, we have the benefit of an infrastructure of government administration. We have several departments that do different things to protect the people and protect our interests. And many of our small towns don't have that, and they look to us for leadership. And I think that that might feed into one of the areas that maybe we'll talk about later. But, I've loved the work. Probably the most important work has been constituency services, and really working with different parts of government to make a difference, and really reaching out to people. I think since day one, I've been having town halls every year. Since day one, I've engaged young people to mentor them in internships every session except for this last session, and certainly with the Legislative Black Caucus when I was chair. I developed a fellow program and had a full summer interns in partnership with the Urban League. So it's been fun and interesting to be a part of good public policy and be a part of helping people in their own personal circumstances.
Can you go back a bit before you became a state representative and just did you go to high school here?
Went to high school in California. I went to college here. I started out at college at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And I say this in front of young people who think that when they make a mistake that that's the end. But I wasn't a very serious student. Learned a lot, met a lot of people, did a lot, but I just wasn't as serious as I needed to be. And my parents, kind of laid down the law, and I had to get out of their pockets and come home and work. And I ended up going to UALR and UAPB. I did summer school at UAPB because I lived in Little Rock and I worked in Little Rock, and that kind of was the beginning of my policy and political exposure and career.
What'd you study?
I studied political science as well. I got 2 degrees. I got a degree in political science and professional technical writing, and almost got a minor in philosophy, but I was one class shy, and I just had to be done.
So what is your occupation now?
So When I first started in the legislature, I served as the chief operating officer with the UAMS Center for Diversity Affairs. And I served in that role for almost 10 years until 2016. When I started, I was a director over recruitment for diversity and was promoted to chief operating officer. Actually, the position was created. And we did quite a few innovative things. And while I was there, developed an internship sort of, well, really a shadowing program we called SHEP, and created a PCAP prep program. Hired interns to work with me on those programs. But our PCAP prep program actually generated the highest percentage of underrepresented minority students, particularly African American students, in 2010. And at that time, that was a record. I think maybe they have admitted more students maybe once since then, if at all. But that was a major success story, and wasn't my story. It was really the story of young people who I think came to UAMS wondering if they could do that, if they could get in, if they could do well on the PCAT, if they could be prepared, because many students are first generation college.
Right.
And don't get the kind of exposure that other students do. And I knew that, and so I love working with young people. I mean, that's where my exposure to young people and the issues and needs that they have came from. And I learned how to recruit and how to counsel and help and talk to young people. And one thing I never do is, and never did, is tell a young person who may not have been prepared, may not have ever been prepared if they weren't able to do the things that they needed to do to meet the prerequisites or to get over their test-taking anxiety. But I always told a student, you can do this, and these are the things you need to do to prepare yourself to do this. Here are some of the things that are barriers, and I'm here to help you.
Not say no, but
never.
Here's how we can say yes.
And met so many students who were told, you're not, maybe you should do something else.
Maybe you should do something.
Yeah, not me, but other people, like they had been told by teachers in high school or other counselors, I don't think you're medical school material, but maybe, or I don't think you're going to be able to get in, but maybe you should do this instead.
Right.
And I just don't think you can tell anybody what they can do. I have seen, I'll give you a story, and I won't say her name. She was a UAPB student from Chicago. She had been adopted. I think she had an aunt or someone she knew, but she ended up at UAPB. She wanted to be a physician. She told me that the first time that I came to UAPB to recruit. And the second time, I said, hey, you're about to graduate. What do you plan to do? Are you preparing for I just started doing my normal battery of questions. Are you preparing for the MCAT? She just bursted in tears and ran away from me.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So, the short version is I ended up, talking to her, encouraging her. After she graduated, she did our MCAT prep program. She did, and I connected her with some different physicians in the community. One of them said, hey, you need to prepare yourself by reading. You need to read a book a week. You need to prepare for the MCAT. Get yourself together. She ended up raising her score, her practice test score from 17 to making like a 27 or a 29 on the MCAT. She got into school, got out in 4 years, had no issues with grades, had no issues with her boards. And I'm happy to say that I was a part of introducing her to her now husband, who is an ER doc. And she is a pediatrician and just completed her her fellowship, and she actually takes care of preemies.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, and there are more like that. There are other stories that didn't turn out like that. But there were so many examples of people who would be written off because they didn't present as, what the doctor looks like in people's minds. But they were awesome, hard-working young people who were driven, and they've made excellent doctors because they knew what it was like for people who did not have access to fill in the blank, to transportation, to healthcare insurance. And I'd like to transition to say that I think Pine Bluff suffers from too many people inside the city and outside of the city who talk about what we're not and what we can't do.
You dismiss Pine Bluff.
And we are absolutely not to be dismissed. We are not dead. We are not failing and faltering because something is wrong with us. We have had challenges like many, many cities have had, and we need strong leadership. We need bold initiatives, and we just need to stop being afraid of trying and doing some things that are new while working together to do them. We have to prioritize. It's a lot to do. So we have to prioritize.
I'm wondering, do you know if this diversity program is still around? I know diversity programs have fallen out of favor under.
Yeah, I mean, they always do.
Republican
And then they call them something else, affirmative action, diversity, DEI, now it'll be something else. The bottom line is, students need access, students need resources, and we know that discrimination exists. We know that racism exists. It has historically. What are we going to do about it? We can't tell people, go be successful, work, be self-sufficient, contribute to your community, and the adequate resources that are necessary for them to do that are not accessible to them. It's not that they don't exist, they're just not accessible to them. We have to do something about that.
Okay. So you had already made your announcement that you were going to run for re-election as a state representative.
I had.
And then you changed gears.
I
just
did.
wondered if you got long COVID or got hit in the head or like what happened.
I do have long COVID. I did not get hit in the head. It's a lot of dynamics, but what I will say ultimately is that I became very concerned and saw the likelihood of us entering into another term of local government that would not generate the kind of change that I firmly believe that we need, that I'm certain of it, I'm certain of it. And
just get more of the same.
Absolutely. We can't afford that. One of the things that I tell people when I sit down with business leaders, I sit down with citizens, I sit down with young people, and people don't know. Since 2010, we have lost well over 10,000 people, well over 10,000 jobs. The last census in 2010, we were just under 50,000 people, and now we're just under 40,000 people. And when we've been so mired in all of the controversy around Go Forward. And
you're stealing all my questions.
But we're not paying attention to the real issues that ail us, because if we look at, what Go Forward brought, and outside of Go Forward, development, new businesses. No matter what you think about, medical marijuana, we have dispensaries here. We have 2 grow facilities here in the city. And we have a relatively new casino that has brought in tax dollars. From Mayor Reedus's era, we had the penny tax that largely contributed to the funding and opening of our aquatic center. We had the tax that paid for the library, and I have to give a shout out to Ann Talbot, because I had my reservations, but I told her what my concerns were, and she said, okay, we're going to talk to the people. She did that, and I have to say publicly that that library is awesome. It is an awesome facility. Kids are using it. The community is using it. And it is a wonderful, I think, investment for the city, and a beautiful structure as well.
Ricky seems like he's doing a good job, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when you think about these things that we have seen in the last 7 years, still we are losing and declining in population. And what that means is it not only means something for our schools, if kids aren't going to school there and other kids are leaving our public schools.
Right.
It means something for our economy, because that means that there are not people here to buy locally. That means that there are not people here to open businesses. You know, attrition happens in every city. People are going to die. People are going to move to go to college. People are going to move to go get a different job. But when you have a city that is not, you know, we are the fastest shrinking city in the country. Amid all of this excitement, people buying properties here, and we should be excited. But we have to focus and we have to prioritize. We cannot afford anymore to argue, fuss, and fight over things that are not going to generate the kind of change that we need in the short and long term. And it takes leadership to drive that ship and make that happen. And I think that, you know, you asked me to tell you about myself. I know I've gotten off topic, but I would say that I am the only person running with considerable government experience across different levels of government who hasn't had an opportunity yet to lead this city. I think that, you know, several people in the race have had an opportunity in different capacities. Some one in the same capacity, two in the same capacities.
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't it happened yet? You know, and I would say that even in my capacity as a state representative, I have sought to work together with local government leaders and helped wherever I could, whether it's being instrumental in bringing you know, dollars to the city through the Delta Regional Authority and the dollars that we were able to generate from a grant, which contributed to the Aquatic Center. Years ago, started working on the funding for the USDA flood prevention dollars that we got a lion's share of, $32 million. That happened, that started years ago from conversations with the Secretary of Agriculture in the previous administration. So, you know, those kinds of things take time, but it also takes partnership. And I think that I've demonstrated that I can work with people who I don't agree with and who may not agree with me.
You probably had a lot of practice.
I've had a lot of practice. I have. And I'm going to tell you something else. And I'm sorry to be skipping around, but you keep saying things that bring other things to mind. You know, I'm still serving in my capacity and still go up to the Capitol for our oversight meetings. Every time I go up there now, like we had our the first forum last night, and they covered that, and I got so many people who are really excited about my run and believe that, you know, I'll do a good job, and they've seen, these are people who don't necessarily agree with me but believe that I will do a good job. And what is important about that is we have people in position to help provide us with the resources we need. And we've done some of that through.
You're saying your connection to
Absolutely.
Little Rock would be beneficial.
Absolutely. Those relationships matter, so that when we need legislative remedies or funding to be able to meet some of our challenges, address some of our needs, grow our economy, I think that I'm the best positioned to help make that happen. And not only that, I think that, having a track record in passing legislation that has had a benefit, whether, we talk all the time about Pine Bluff becoming a destination. I passed legislation to gain ownership of the Arkansas Entertainment exhibit and the fundraiser that went along with it. That's right now in our convention center.
Right.
And passed legislation to create the Delta Rhythm and Bayous Highway, and assisted Jimmy Cunningham in getting the legal assistance he needed to set up the 501c3. Those are the kinds of things that happen behind the scenes so that the good stuff just appears in the city for us to do something with, for us to partner. And I've not been shy about my support for Kenesha Caldwell, who's running for the position I'm currently serving in, not just because of our relationship. I've known her since she was at church. I've known her from church, and she and her husband attended there before their daughter was born, and now her daughter, is going off to college. She contacted me a long time ago and said, "Hey, I'm ready to serve." She's a nurse practitioner, and she was like, "Hey, I'm ready to serve." And we talked about her maybe running for local office one day. I was helping her with an issue. Fast forward, when I started thinking about a month out of filing, running for mayor, I thought, okay, I can't just leave without tapping someone to make sure someone runs, and someone who can really do the job and pick up, where I leave off. But most importantly, I think do more to work together. I think that, and I've told this story before, I started working in state government as a committee secretary for the legislature a long time ago. And so as committee staff, you kind of get to see and learn the process and see what goes on and hear how things are changing, but also go to, we used to have a lot more subcommittee meetings out into the state during the interim. And one thing that I can tell you that I've seen happen over the years is Northeast Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, Central Arkansas, Southwest Arkansas, their local leadership, with whatever hub takes, the leadership lead, they have developed regional leadership plans and priorities so that they could better work with their state legislators, so that they could better work with their congressional delegation to get things done to grow their economy. That's why you see the population growing extremely, and the resources that went to ASU in Northeast Arkansas. In the early 90s, my first trip to ASU and, Jonesboro, I felt like, I was in a tiny town. And now it's a burgeoning small city.
Yeah.
It's about to become it's really a medium-sized city for Arkansas, by Arkansas standards now.
It's bigger than Fort Smith now. It's getting close.
I don't know if it's bigger than Fort Smith, but and as a matter of fact, I think I wrote down some numbers the other night, but they have, city proper, 79, almost 80,000 people. Hot Springs has grown. There was nothing in Hot Springs, nothing. It was dead in the 90s. People gave up on it. But they worked with they worked with the federal delegation and got the kind of designation, and now it is a travel destination. Businesses, art galleries, restaurants, everything propping, all of that happened over a period of a few decades. But it was nothing. There was nothing there. And all during that time when I first started sort of traveling around, that was in the early 90s, we had close to 50,000 people.
Right.
Okay? We now have...
Well, we used to have, 65.
Correct.
At one point.
We have less than 40 now, 38,000. Benton, there was nothing. The only thing in Benton was this big brown, I think it was called Brown's restaurant, right?
Yeah. Like 100-foot buffet.
Yeah.
Or something.
So there was Brown's, and the only reason I knew about Benton is because there was a UALR site to go take evening classes, and I had a class in Benton. Now, I didn't go into the community, but there was nothing like what you see along Benton and Bryant now.
It just never stopped.
Bryant has almost the same number of people we do. Bryant has 36,593 people right now. No, not even right now. That was in 2022.
I look at cities that are about the same size, and we look like just our amenities here. Mm-hmm. Restaurants, grocery stores, retail. We look like a city of about 19,000.
We do, but we have a history, we have the housing stock, we have the land, we have the industry to be a power, to lead Southeast Arkansas and take our rightful place in helping to develop the region, not just Pine Bluff. And that's why we need leadership that is far more bold than focusing on what we can do with the current budget. And like, if I heard last night, and just no disrespect, but another conversation just about the potholes. We have a whole street department. If we're not adequately filling potholes,
We were talking about that.
yeah,
today.
there are areas of this state where they, county road dollars are few, and people have challenges getting their school buses from one end to the other. I hear this from my colleagues. Pine Bluff has a whole street department with several people employed in it and leadership. I believe it's, I'm not going to say what size it is, but I'll say this. That just means that we need to make sure that we have the right leadership in that department, that team of city employees have the resources and the training they need so that we can do the work for the people in this city.
I just want to say that I have like 5 pages of questions I've only got like this.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Ask away.
So, tell me what Pine Bluff will look like after a term under Vivian Flowers, a 4-year term.
Yeah, I can't answer that because a 4-year term under Vivian Flowers doesn't have to do with just Vivian Flowers. I can tell you what my priorities are. Okay. I can talk to you about our current resources. I can talk to you about relationships. I can talk to you about existing funding opportunities, whether it's with foundations or especially the federal government. I can talk to you, about how I can work with people. And I can give you a vision. I can set goals. But the only way that those things will happen is if we work together. And now I don't just mean the city council and the mayor. Like that's basic. That's given that the city council and the mayor's office must work together to push forward and realize, goals and priorities that are set. And I think beyond, being civil in meetings, we need to plan together. And we need to be transparent doing it. We don't need to be afraid to invite the press to a meeting for strategic planning. Or we can have a whole conference. We can go on a strategy session and invite the press. It's okay. It's okay to be transparent. It's okay to but at some point, y'all will probably get tired of watching all that sausage making and maybe not even come, but it's okay. It's the people's money. We're there to, represent the interests of the people, but we have to do more than come to meetings, right? There has to be planning and goal setting together. You have a legislative body, they hold the purse strings, they set policy. The primary role of the mayor is administrative, is implementation, is executive. That is the executive role for the city. And so if we're not working together to figure out how to best use and most efficiently use city dollars, where can we move some things around? How can we use technology, right? I think that's something we have to look out at for our police department. So when we talk about public safety, when we talk about crime, our biggest challenge is the violent crime and the homicides. That's our biggest challenge across the board. If we can't hold on to our officers, and I know we're doing better, but we still have about a $10,000 to $12,000 gap just with Benton. Benton has fewer people than us. They pay their police officers $10,000 to $12,000 more than we do. So, how do we math that math?
Yeah.
For people that we want to go risk their lives, solve our crimes, be responsive to us, and stay here. We want them to live here. We want them to stay here. We want them to raise their families here. How do we help them do their jobs? How do we compensate them so that they don't have to leave? Because one of the things I've been talking to everybody, right? And I've talked to several law enforcement. I talked to an officer, actually a detective, and a sergeant. Like, I've talked to lieutenants. I'm talking to officers on the street. And I always ask, how did we compete before? Because we used to have even lower salaries. Well, we also had a much lower standard of living, and we weren't competing with Benton. We weren't competing with Bryant. We weren't, you know what I mean? And so all of those dynamics, coupled with what's happening to us in a globally competitive economy and society, things are changing, and we're going to have to change with the times. And that means technology, that means innovation, that means better software system. The cars are great for our officers. They need other tools, and the people need us to invest in better public lighting. That seems really simple. Representative Ken Ferguson and I called a meeting and brought Entergy together with a couple of our city officials so that we could figure out what can we do about this? Is there something we need to do on the legislative level?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was, it was local. The answer was local. Entergy.
You want them, we can do it.
Correct. And so that means funding. And so we can't, say, okay, city, let us tax you for a public safety tax, but we have no specificity on what that's going to mean. And I know that some of that money needs to go toward salaries, some of that money needs to go toward insurance. Our police officers don't get their insurance paid for. So while they have a challenge, their salaries are competitively low, they're also having to pay every pay period, if they have a family, over $200 out of their paychecks for health insurance.
I've also heard that you mentioned that they're in competition. We are in competition with other cities, and I've heard that the expectation for what they will do is less in others. I guess it comes down to like the number of calls that you.
Wait, say that again. The expectation
for like the number of calls you will get on a shift. Maybe our shifts average this number of calls, and
we're a busier city. We have a busier department,
and you're gonna answer 25% more calls.
But let me tell you what else I found out. I found out that even though we're a busier city, people come here to be trained because they can go anywhere after that. And not just because we're busier or not because of the crime. Because like I said, what people don't realize is crime between 2010 and 2020 decreased, surpassing our population decline, and in some areas exponentially, except for homicide. So it's not busier like, oh, it's far more crime, I'm less safe. It's, you get more calls. It's
Right.
busier that way. Different kinds of calls. And what I learned is that Pine Bluff is one of those cities where the officers come here and kind of get to do everything. So if I had to draw an analogy to a medical resident, what I learned when I worked at UAMS is graduates don't like to get a residency at UAMS. Now they want to get one someplace, and they'll take what they can get because, you know, it's not a whole lot of slots, right? About half of our graduates have to go someplace else for residency. But they want to come someplace like Pine Bluff, Jefferson Medical Regional. They want to go to the Delta. They want to go to areas where, number one, you have people who have needs, right? That's where you learn. They also want to go someplace where they're not just doing emergency. They're not just doing, delivering babies. If they get to do everything, they get to learn optimally and be a better internist or be a better family medicine. So my understanding is for our police department, officers come here and get that kind of training. So you get that kind of training, you become a really good officer. Now you get an opportunity to get closer to home and make $10,000 more a year. If you have a family, what are you going to do, right? So I think that just going back to supporting additional resources to retain our officers, we definitely need to do that. But it can't be just that, because we have to make it so that there are other benefits. It used to be that government jobs had massive benefits and security,
Right.
so that people that's what made those jobs competitive. Even in the state, I was just talking to somebody the other day with state police, and they're having a hard time, if you can believe that, holding on to their IT. Because really across state government, IT is a hot job.
Right.
IT, you get paid, depending on your training, you get paid six figures easily. State jobs don't start at six figures, even the IT. So what is the carrot? Well, if we are a state that's constantly talking about tax cuts and reducing workforce and having smaller government, but for what? Great, we want the smallest government possible. We want to be most efficient, but not at the expense of not providing the kinds of services that we need to as a state.
So the next several questions have to do with Go Forward.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't a fan of Go Forward initially, and you weren't a fan, I don't believe, for either the first try in May to renew that tax or in November.
Mm-hmm.
I know you and I have talked about this, and I've covered meetings where you have expressed your opinion about that, but refresh our memory and tell us why you have not been a fan.
Yeah, and I'm not one of those people that said we don't need to do anything. I wasn't one of those people in May or November who said we don't need to do anything and we need to just say no and that's it. What I said in May and November is no, not now. Because I felt then, and I still feel now, if we're going to propose a sales and use tax to a community with great needs, we have to prioritize, we have to be specific. But most importantly, we have to be transparent and accountable. And when I say transparent, I'm talking about letting the people know how much money is coming in, letting them know what you're spending it on. To be accountable, you have to provide the people with information about what they're voting for. Specifically, these are the things we're going to do over the next 7 years.
So more of a penny for progress.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say that because I'm not saying more of a penny for progress with regard to the substance of it, but I'll say more of a sales and use tax that you see in any other city.
Here's what we're going to do with this money.
Including El Dorado, which is what Go Forward was patterned after. Right? So, the El Dorado Challenge and the El Dorado Promise that was associated with that tax and that effort came with community meetings that were accessible, came with a strategic plan that was specific, that had a budget that was specific, that had deliverables that were specific. It also came with a Pine Bluff Promise scholarship program that
El Dorado Promise.
I'm sorry, see, I have Pine Bluff Promise on the brain, but within El Dorado Promise.
I know you pushed for a Pine Bluff Promise.
For sure. El Dorado Promise was extremely successful, and I have my phone here just so I could bring this up during this interview, hoping that this would come up. So the El Dorado Promise boasts on their website community impact, and it tells you about the results from the promise. And I won't go into details, but I'll just go along the list of things you can click on. Increased higher education outcomes, K through 12 improvements, higher test scores, culture change, community response improvements, economic development, promise backpacks for kindergartners. Now, if you heard about some of the specifics and how it affected the school at large, how it affected the teachers, how it affected expectations among the teachers, administration, and the students, and in the community, it's incredible to read. And it was an important pairing to the tax. And the tax focused on their infrastructure. So after their first 7 years, they grew 70 jobs. Their El Dorado Promise Scholarship didn't grow the population, but guess what? It stopped the bleeding. They were seeing the kind of flight from their schools like we've been seeing. It stopped that bleeding. And the students there benefited.
And the promise, you want to explain that just briefly?
Yes, so the El Dorado Promise Scholarship basically had a funder in then Murphy Oil. They no longer fund it now. And the scholarship basically provided it was determined based upon the number of years that the student matriculated or attended school in the El Dorado School District. And whatever the optimal number of years, and I think it's K through 12, you could get a full tuition scholarship anywhere in the country that you were accepted for 4 years. And it just was, they had amazing outcomes academically, and a lot of students took advantage of that. I am certain, based upon the data, that students who otherwise would have left with their families to go to another school or to another city stayed to take advantage of that scholarship.
Thousands of dollars.
I guarantee you that some families, and I only can guarantee it because I know of families. I don't know the families, but I know of families from talking to people in that community who moved there so that their kids could benefit from that scholarship. That's the kind of energy we need here.
Now they did have Daddy Big Bucks with the Murphy Oil.
I heard that all the time. We don't have a Murphy Oil.
Yeah. So what do you do?
We have a Simmons Bank. We have a Reliance Bank. We have an industrial park full of businesses. We have a strong tie to Entergy, and certainly have a strong tie to Walmart. So we don't need a Murphy Oil if we spread the investment
So you think it's
across Pine Bluff business community.
you think you could duplicate that here in some form or fashion?
Yeah, and I'll say this: I don't think we need to necessarily duplicate it exactly. I think that we can tailor a Pine Bluff promise to address our needs and our assets. We have a 4-year university and a 2-year college right here in Pine Bluff. We could start with providing resources for our scholarship recipients to attend one of those schools. And if they are interested and get into a program that is not housed at those colleges, they could go to another college. We could limit it. We could make it instead of a primary scholarship, a secondary scholarship where, after you get your financial aid and other primary scholarships, we supplement. There are a lot of ways that we can do it and still be successful and still make it like really beneficial for our young people. And the other thing that we could do is tailor it to not only address scholarships for post-secondary education, we could also do it with pre-K. We could, develop within our economic development, because we know how critical pre-K education is and how that ties into economic development. Ask Conway, ask Arkadelphia. They invest in pre-K. We could use our Pine Bluff promise to invest in partial or supplementary scholarships for high quality pre-K programs, so that families who are working families but can't afford high quality pre-K for their kids can invest in that. We have resources here. So we could work with DHS to determine what that looks like. We could establish some sort of mechanism within city government to certify Pine Bluff pre-K programs as high quality. There are a lot of things that we can do that could keep people, retain students, draw people here. And I firmly believe that, and I think that was one of the things that was missing. You can't say we're going to replicate, El Dorado Challenge, which many of those people voted for that, because even though the money didn't come from the city, it was all a plan. If people felt like, okay, the same people who are affording us this opportunity for our kids are also saying they're going to grow jobs, they're going to build infrastructure, they're going to do these other things in tandem with that, and they put a tax in front of us, I'm more likely to vote for that tax when I see how the whole thing is working. And I've been talking to people, and I think that people would be supportive, as I was, of a sales and use tax that was comprehensive, accountable to the people and providing information, transparent, or providing a plan and a budget, and transparent to the people along the way. And
okay, so that feeds into this next question. We had a story last weekend on, we just wanted to ask, go forward, what are your plans? You've lost twice. Are you going to fold up your tent and go away? What are your plans? And we didn't really get an answer. So my question is, tell us your stand on where go forward, on go forward right now. And if they were sitting in the room, if Ryan Watley was here or Tommy May was here, what would you tell them?
I would say to Ryan Watley, you are a young leader. You have talents, you have credentials, and you have and could continue to serve as an example for our community, for our city. And I would say to Tommy May that he has been a stalwart leader and responsible, I haven't forgotten, responsible for the growth and development of our athletic program or our infrastructure at UAPB, and a staunch supporter. We need more like you in that regard. And the only way that we can do that is to open up opportunities for other private partners. I don't think that we need to limit ourselves. I don't think that we need to be divided and engage in, attacks on each other. We have enough people to defend ourselves from as a city. And I think that if we focus on allowing Go Forward, or other private entities, or even the A&P Commission, to say, hey, if you have a proposal, let's say that the city, the people of this city wanted to see an economic development, 1 cent sales tax for a period of 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever. And I'll go back to El Dorado. They did 7 years. They came back and the people renewed that tax for another 10 years because they were able to show this is the result. They were accountable. They were able to show this is what happened with El Dorado Promise, and this is what happened from the challenge, the tax. And this is what we're going to do over the next 10 years. I think we can do that in Pine Bluff, but it's going to have to be the choice of the people. And we cannot regain trust if we aren't transparent and accountable. But to answer your question, what I would say would be positive, because we have to figure out how to progress from here. We have to figure out how to progress from here. The people said no twice. They did. They said no to how we were doing things before. What I'm saying is we need to progress, do things differently and together.
So, let me be clear. If they're not saying now what their plans are, then I'm guessing they have not totally given up on the idea of trying again.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody who wins the primary is a friend of Go Forward, that they might try in November.
Or maybe.
Is that a mistake?
Or maybe.
And would you support that as a mayor? Would you be team Go Forward as mayor?
No, I'm team Pine Bluff. And what I would hope is that Go Forward would be team Pine Bluff, right? That any other private partners would be team Pine Bluff. And what I'm saying is the mayor has to focus on leading the city first. And if that means that if the people want to see a sales and use tax and economic development tax that can serve very specific focus areas to usher us in some bold development that we can't get with our current budget, then I think that we have to do it in a way that fosters public-private partner. I mean, that is what urban renewal was created for. It wasn't designed or written and specify one public-private partner. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so we're missing out on an opportunity to engage with several nonprofits who might raise some private dollars and then make proposal to the city. But I think that when we have a clear process and a focus, and again, transparency and accountability that re-engages the public trust, then we can progress in a way that doesn't place scrutiny on any of our private partners because the city is doing its job, separate and apart from any entity that was not elected.
So what I have heard people say is, Pine Bluff may need a tax to operate, a 5/8 cent tax perhaps, but they don't.
Not to operate, to grow.
Okay. But they don't need a go-forward filter. They don't need that entity dictating how those dollars.
But
pretty
not
much
just
dictate.
that, any. I'm saying I would add to that and say we don't need any filter. We have a duly elected government and people who are working for this city who have jobs. So the leadership of the city needs to ensure that that is how we are functioning. Period. And, you know, it is not, it can't be the action of any city leader or leadership across the board to engage a private entity who is not accountable to the people to dictate what happens in the city.
But
That
yet they
in
did.
terms of they did.
They do.
They
Because they have enough friendly council members.
but they did because the city let it. So to me, I don't have anything to say to anyone from any nonprofit for what they did or what they tried to do. My argument would be that the city leadership has to make sure that the city is doing what the city is supposed to do. And do it together, because we are the ones as elected officials who are accountable to the people.
I'm still not sure if you're a fan of Go Forward or not.
I'm not. I'm a fan of Pine Bluff.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of any, in my capacity as an elected official, I'm a fan of my constituents. I'm a fan of my cities. And as a candidate for mayor, I'm a fan of my city. I'm a fan of my people first. That doesn't mean I can't be a partner to any nonprofit, any private business.
Well, they are the 1,000-pound elephant in the room. You can say any nonprofit, but they leverage the power of the city council.
But under different leadership, they did.
To how millions of dollars of tax dollars are spent. No other nonprofit has that power. But because they have friendly city council members, they are able to, and a friendly mayor.
I mean, you're answering your own question.
But I mean, you said that because the city has allowed it to happen, but the city did allow it to happen. It was. You can't point to me one state law or one ordinance, whether it was passed by the public or passed by the city council and signed by the mayor, that says that any nonprofit, whether it's Go Forward or not, because it would have to either specifically apply to Go Forward or would have to allow that for a nonprofit or a public-private partner. You can't point to me any language that allowed for what we saw. And therefore, that couldn't happen without the governmental entity with the authority to say, yes, please. You see what I'm saying? So if I'm in a room, philosophically,
if I'm in a room with some prospective partners and we're laying out how we are going to get some things done, and the people said, here's the money to get those things done, and I am the leader of the executive office, and the legislative body is the legislative body that holds the purse strings, and that legislative body turns the money over to the executive office in one fell swoop, and then the executive office says, okay, y'all, this is how we're going to do things, and we work it out to do things a certain way, and everybody's of that understanding, and then that's how it goes. I'm still the one saying that's how it goes.
Yeah, but in this instance, we have a lot more questions here.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Jimmy Cunningham.
Yeah.
He was going to get $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
But that ran afoul of Go Forward. And they said, no, don't give him that, because we didn't say to give him that. Give that money to Urban Renewal, and we will give it to Jimmy as we see fit.
But don't forget that it was by the city council that initially made the decision to process those funds through economic development. And then there was a change to put the money with Go Forward. So do you see what I'm saying? There are policy decisions that are being made that in this case, afforded Go Forward to make those decisions.
Yes.
Without those policy decisions, and without those policy leaders, or no matter who it was, without the city, I'll say, saying, yes, you may do this, it doesn't happen. So what for me it means, it still goes back to leadership. That's what it all goes back to, because the authority.
Jimmy Cunningham still having trouble getting his money. He still has to.
That was the outcome, but what precipitated that were decisions made by leadership. And so when I'm as a candidate, when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to you as the press about this issue, it doesn't need to be an argument or a finger pointing just as far as how do we progress from here. Because to me, the people spoke. The people said, twice, I don't want this done the way it's been done. For whatever reasons. Everybody had different reasons and theories about what happened, what didn't happen, or whatever. The paper did its job in using the record and interviews to say, this is what happened, this is what's happening, this is where the money, where the money is, where the money isn't, all of that, right? Now, where do we go? And what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to not answer questions. I'm answering them based on my perspective as a candidate. And I feel very strongly that the people spoke. The current sales and use tax is running according to the Go Forward plans that have been defined over the years until September of this year. We have to be about the business of figuring out as a city, do we need another sales and use tax? If we do, how are we going to do it? Because the people said no to that. And if the people might say, I don't want any of it, then leadership has to figure out, how do we do anything outside of what we already have money for?
Well, I'll reference again the fact that they have not said that they are going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think they're waiting until March.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a friendly mayor who comes out of primaries, maybe they've got a shot and they'll put it on the ballot. If Shirley Washington is that person, she's shown herself to be friendly, and they think, well, maybe we've got a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they would have a shot with Joni Robinson. And I'm wondering, are they going to have a shot?
A shot to do what?
A shot to
continue
to put that back on the ballot and give it a third shot, because if they get it passed, then they've got a friendly mayor.
Yeah, no. No. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm telling people as a part of my priority. And I think I've been really clear over the years where I stand on that issue. Absolutely not. I wouldn't do that with or for any Go Forward or any private entity or nonprofit to do things as they have been done in the past. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I think that it would be the role of the mayor and the city council to come together with proposed ideas on what that would look like. And I think it would be our responsibility to engage the public on what that would look like, given that they would be the ones voting on it. And I have been, I think, consistent in saying, for me, a sales and use tax would need to be an investment in youth, economic development, economic growth, and public
You've
safety.
been very clear with that.
Period.
Okay. So we ended the year, Pine Bluff ended the year with 28 homicides. Up, what was it? 25% over the year before. Generally, we're in the, and you've touched on this some. I looked up some statistics when I wrote about it, and it was, we're a small town, so we don't get lumped into Chicago and Detroit or whatever, but per capita, we're 11 times the national average for homicides, and we are actually the most dangerous big city. And one statistic I saw was St. Louis, and we are actually a smidge above them as far as per capita homicides. So we have this crisis because our people are dying.
Crisis indeed.
And we have a crisis in what this looks like for outsiders. So we have internal trauma and external, why would I want to live in Pine Bluff? Where does it go? What can a mayor do to turn that ship around?
Say that last part again. What kind of mayor?
What
Can a mayor do? I think that what a mayor must do is not be reactionary. I think what a mayor must do is be comprehensive. I think a mayor must be preventive. I think a mayor must be bold, and a mayor must be relentless in seeking partnerships and resources. If I had to give you bullets
We'll
on,
talk about bullets here in a minute.
I mean, yes. If I had to give you bullets of items that we need to focus on, I would say that number one, we need to regenerate our violent crimes task force. I understand why that went away because we don't have the man/woman power. And our law enforcement agency is struggling with a lack of capacity to address the needs that need to be addressed. So I think that, if we look at this as a 3-alarm fire, that's the fire that has to be put out first. I think that we have to make a very solid investment in, I would refer to as infrastructure, law enforcement infrastructure, public lighting, and tools like public surveillance system that could at least capture points of entry and exits into the city. Whitehall has a public surveillance system. Little Rock has one. We have the highest murder rate.
You talking about the cameras that read?
Not just the cameras that read license plates, but as like at the Capitol, we have a very sophisticated camera system. And I'm not talking about getting something like that because that's a very isolated perimeter, right? But if you don't have those tools available in this day and age to prevent and investigate and solve crimes, we're already at a disadvantage. And not only, do we not have these resources, anybody will tell you it is extremely dark in this city. I don't know when it happened, but it's extreme. I mean, that's one of the things we talked about at that meeting before. How can law enforcement be effective just in patrolling at night, which we know is a much smaller patrol? Criminals know it's a much smaller patrol. How do you catch someone? How do you see what's going on when you can't see over 20 feet in front of you because it's so dark?
I've noticed that too.
And, you know, last night, one of the candidates for city council talked about, you know, that issue, which I was happy to hear. But he talked about, you know, getting on his tennis shoes and going, you know, across the city and writing down lights. We don't need to do that. We need to be a city that better communicates with our citizens. There is already an app that Entergy put into place, I want to say last year or the year before, that will allow customers to share information about where lights need to be fixed.
Yeah, I used that once and it just...
But if we're not using it to say this is how to fix it, I mean, we have a tool and we're not using it, we're not communicating with people to use it. We also have a whole city administration. We should be able to utilize a city office for people to call into specifically for that, whether it's a hotline, whether it's an email address, so that we can more quickly communicate as a city with Entergy to fix what needs to be fixed, but also to make the investments in public lighting where it makes sense.
I think they're pretty quick to fix stuff.
They are, but they have
But you gotta be told.
But they have to know. And so if the app isn't working properly for a few people, how do they know? If you know what I'm saying? If the city is not communicating with citizens to say, hey, this is a problem, we're working on this end to improve, but we also need to make sure that lights that are not working properly or that have been put out for whatever reason, that they get fixed. This is how you can help us. Either call us, if we don't answer, email, leave us a message, or use the app. We'll show you how to use it. You know, there's certain things that we can do to use technology so that we don't have to put on our tennis shoes and walk around the city and write it down and take pictures. That's archaic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if we have to do it to get it done, yes, but we don't have to. And I would say just for city services as a whole, I've been in the legislature almost 10 years. Other cities have full-time legislators. Florida has a part-time legislature, but they also have a full-time staff person, every legislator. We don't have that. We have a pool of a shared staff, of constituency services staff, because many of us have, you know, other jobs. Some are retired, some have businesses. The bottom line is everybody doesn't live in Little Rock, right? We don't have offices and a full-time staff in Little Rock like that. So
I'm guessing the city pays for those lights whether they're working or not. They don't have meters on them, and nobody comes by and reads a meter and says, okay, the city owes us. So,
I mean, you pay for their placement, right? You pay for the hardware, but just like your light at home, if your light's not on, you're not paying for the electricity. So I think that, you know, we are paying in certain ways, but, you know, I think, imagine whether it's about the lighting or a pothole or, you know, business license or whatever, that someone calls their city council man or woman and he or she is at work. So that person can call a constituency services coordinator instead, or that city council person can call the coordinator and say, hey, I've heard from 3 of my constituents today, and they're all on this block. They're having this problem. There are 2 lights. You know, can you communicate with them for me? I'm on it, but it keeps the back and forth. And from
Who was
going where I think it often
Who
goes.
was the council member who was going to fill in their shoes?
It was a candidate. William
William Fells?
Fells, yes. Yeah.
So last summer, we in the middle of what became a lot of homicides and a lot of young people, we brought in some professionals, some criminologists. I don't think anything's come of that, but do we need some outside help? I mean, they came and said, you have the tools here. But maybe, perhaps we do have the tools, but we just don't know how to use them. But, if you talk to some criminologists, they're like, this is not undefeatable. You can, through certain techniques, lower the homicide rate.
Yes.
But I don't know that we've done that.
No. And I'll add, I didn't finish the bullets. I would also add prevention. I think that we have the GVI program, but we also have a summer camp that is, that we're not engaging the way that we used to. And I think that when we look at our youth, all of the homicides don't happen as a result of youth violence, number one.
Right.
So I think if we look across the spectrum of youth violence, of domestic violence, I think that we also have to think about it from a perspective of community, of trauma. And while, the number of shootings / homicides, because not all of them end up in murder, there are families associated with this. There are victims associated with it. And so when, I think we not only have to look at it from the criminologist perspective and that data perspective, but we are a city of neighborhoods and communities. So
families.
So the other bullet, I'll close with this, is about, two more, is number one about neighborhood and community policing. I don't know if you recall, shortly after the George Floyd murder, and as well as the shooting on 28th Street, it was like a melee of shooting with young people, and many of them weren't even from here.
Was this a few years ago?
Uh-huh.
This was a few
Yes.
years ago,
Yeah.
and there were like 7 people
Correct.
shot.
Correct.
Yeah. Nobody died.
Correct.
Amazingly.
Praise the Lord. Camara Seals and myself and Michael, why am I brain farting?
Because it's cold in
Yeah.
here.
But anyway, we came together and it is very cold. Like very cold.
It's much hotter.
But we came together and pulled together data from the police department, and that's where we found out about the numbers around the other aspects of crime, right?
That they had actually gone down.
But what we also did a series of meetings and heard from the people.
Right.
Heard about people's concerns, and it was
I remember them well.
harrowing.
Yeah.
Hearing the stories
Yeah.
of moms.
I go home early because I don't want to be out.
I don't let my kids go out and play, not even in our backyard.
Yeah. We get in the back of the house so that
We hear gunshots all night long. I think that neighborhood and community policing is critical. That is what everybody said they wanted. That's what everybody said they don't see. That's what everybody said they needed.
yeah.
And we know what that can mean for violent crime. And I would add that, so I think all of those things together coupled with working with the state for crisis centers to develop resources and alternatives for those with mental illness. Really, 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 really important. All of those things working together. It can't be just one thing. It has to be all of those things together.
So I'll spare you the recording, but on December 31st at 11:50, I went outside and I recorded the cacophony of gunfire. And there is the comment that we got that surprised me was, yeah, what about, they said that was New Year's Eve. What about all of us who have to listen to that every night of the week? And that sort of floored me. If you go out and, depending on where you live, listen, you can hear gunshots. But there is, I don't know, as a mayor, can you raise the bar a little on like what is acceptable? Because I don't see it. I don't see any sort of public service announcements or we're not going to live with this. We shouldn't. We hear more about litter.
I mean, I think that
gunshots.
every, especially in an executive role, so president, governor, county judge, mayor, has a bully pulpit that the legislative body does not. So, yes, that can happen. Exactly how it happens in Pine Bluff, I couldn't tell you right now on the spot, but I would say that I think that the role of the mayor has a bully pulpit that I think must be used.
I don't think it's used on that.
I'm saying that the mayor has that bully pulpit and I would use it.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody who lives in Whitehall, and I mentioned it. I said, don't you have like gunfire and New Year's Eve? And they were like, no, not really. It made me think. So how's your campaign going?
Actually pretty good.
What are your donors saying?
Very positive. I've had people come to the door to bring me a check.
That's nice.
Very nice. And I mean, surprising.
Who is it?
No, hey, come on in. Of course, people using the link, people committing to service. I have an ActBlue link.
Okay.
So using the link and I get, notifications in the email. But I'll tell you, it was a struggle trying to get through the holiday because we have such a short window with the change of the primary date being during presidential years in March versus May. So it's a challenge. But you meet the challenge, So we are working hard to raise money, and I've gotten some wonderful responses from family, friends, existing constituents, future constituents, people I have served with in leadership for the national organization that I serve on and the national board I serve on in DC. Friends who are in DC now. It's been trickling, of course, since the holiday, but it's definitely sped up actually this week significantly. So it's really encouraging.
So I was out walking my dog and I saw a house, and on one side of the driveway there was a Vivian sign, and on the other side was a Joni sign. And I'm wondering, are you guys kind of splitting the same type of vote, but just maybe both are the anti-Shirley vote, or what?
And I'll say this, and it's weird to say as someone who's constantly putting out signs and fielding calls and emails to get signs to people. Signs don't vote, okay? At the same time, your supporters want them, and they want to see them. And, and you want to see them. And you don't, I think as a candidate, you don't want to feel like you are forgetting any part of the city. I think that's really, really important. And I've seen that. I still have areas that I have to cover, and people who've made, requests. That week of hibernation kind of threw a monkey wrench. And so
a very
we're
short window anyway.
Yeah, and so we're playing catch up. But it's, for me, the signage is about two things. It's, number one, just about exposure, because everybody doesn't vote, everybody doesn't know who you are. Even though I've served for, I'm on my 10th year, I can't assume everybody knows me, and I certainly can't assume that everybody supports me. So the signs are just one way. It's, to get your image, your name out, to make people remember your name. But the other thing that's really, really important, is probably more important than that, because there are other ways that I think are more effective than the signs to do that. The other way is to, show your supporters that you are active, to show your supporters that you support, that you're viable for sure, but that you, that you recognize and remember them and their communities. Because I think oftentimes people get forgotten in certain neighborhoods, and, people who don't live on the major thoroughfares, on corners, they want a sign too, especially if they're really staunch and active supporters. And so for me, I not only want to do what I need to do to be competitive with others and with myself. Like, there's certain things in politics, you need to put them in high visibility areas and along, the main thoroughfares. Yes. But for me, I want to make sure that community is remembered in this process and represented as my supporters and people who are active and people who vote.
What do you think Pine Bluff uses its tax dollar wisely?
Yes and no. I think that there are things that we could do better, and there are things that we do well. I'm saying that as a citizen. I've obviously not served in the role, of elected or hired city government, but as a citizen, I see us doing some things well. And then I've had conversations where I felt like, gosh, we could do better in this area. And we do really well with what we have, and with more resources, we could be excellent.
So you've talked about this already, but do we need a sales tax to make the train go? We need to, maybe the 5/8 cent tax, not to make forward tax, but maybe.
And I think I clarified something when you said earlier about functioning, or you might have used a different word, operating. We don't need a tax to operate, to make the train go. The train will go with the funds that we get now.
So the tax is going to be something.
It's
other
extra.
Than that. Yeah.
It's extra, but we need extra,
yeah.
Right? So I talked about a 3-alarm fire. You can't emerge from a 3-alarm fire and not get some insurance money. You're going to have to fix some stuff. And if you want to fix it, soon, so that you don't have like a burned out part of your house that you're constantly fixing on because you keep using, some extra money here and there from efficiency, from savings. Right? That's why you have insurance, right? And so I think we need to get some insurance. And I think we need to get the insurance to pay for economic development. And one of the things that people think when you say economic development is finding some big high-tech, company or some car manufacturer to come to Pine Bluff. No. It would be great if that happens, but that doesn't happen unless and until we support the businesses we have now.
So we're not looking for the savior industry.
Let me say something I keep saying, been saying for years, been saying before I was ever sworn in as state rep. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save us, right?
Although we seem to think that's going to happen.
Well, I think we seem to think that we are going to save ourselves, but ourselves is being seen in city government, county government, federal government, because, and I think rightfully so, people have an expectation that, you know, because the first role of government, even though they don't know that as a political science student or, you know, professor or whatever, the first role of government is protect your people. That's why, you know, police and fire, first responders are sort of the most important line along just anything to protect and keep people safe, right? People tend to think we have to, that's first. And it is extremely important. And then when you're in trouble, whether it's a flood, whether it's a fire, you know, whatever the trouble is, you expect that your government administrative infrastructure is going to step in and fix it, especially if there's an agency for it. So if you have wastewater, if you have, you know, a police department, if you have a fire department, if you have a street department, you know, you expect for things along those lines to get fixed when there's a problem. And that's not unreasonable. That's not people looking to government to do for them what they can do for themselves. That's people looking for government to do for them what the promise of government taking their tax dollars when they, every time they buy something or every time they get paid, to fix it. And it's up to government to say, okay, this is what we have. This is what we can fix in this period of time. Honestly, you say that. You also say, now, to fix it this way, or to grow that way, it would cost this much. We can maybe do it in another 50 years by taking these dollars over here. Or we can do some bonds or do a tax. You know, there are a lot of ways and resources. Or we can do a campaign and try to bring in private partners. Or we can do all of it.
If we want to fight for it.
But you got, yeah. But here's the choice. Now, as leader of this city in this role, whatever that is, I propose we do this. And y'all might say, great idea, Vivian. Or, no way.
Right.
So then you go back to the drawing board with your fellow leaders and you figure it out together.
So is everyone seated at the table in Pine Bluff?
I don't think so. Not at the same time. I think in different ways leaders are, you know. I think people...
Who are we leaving behind?
The people. I
You
think
there's
that...
a disconnect between government and the populace?
For sure. I think we get... and I mean, I think we're all guilty of it. I think you get so like focused in doing whatever your job is, and you get busy. And this whole thing is not set up for you to be responsive to every person and in the moment that they want to be heard. But what I know for sure is people want to be heard. People want to be recognized. People want to be respected. And whether that's the people, whether that's police, elected officials, people want to be heard and respected. Now that part is real simple. And that, I mean, one of the things I've always tried to do is return phone calls. I'm not always successful. I don't always see them all. I don't get them all. I'm not on social media all the time. People used to message me. I didn't even have Messenger on my phone because I believed the conspiracies at the time. But, you know, it's not set up for you like, especially in the legislature, to read every bill in its entirety. That's why you have committees. That's why you have people who are sort of subject matter experts in different areas. And you have to figure out what works best for you to represent your people. And for me, it's always been to hold a series of town hall meetings, whether I was caucus chair or in my own district. I typically did it with everybody, in the county who represented any portion of the county. Hey, let's all get together and tell the people what we did, tell the people what to look out for, answer their questions. People appreciate it. People appreciate it. So I think we need to do that as a city as well.
So here's something else you mentioned to some extent, but we're somewhere under 40,000 population. We've lost a grocery store in the east part of town, furniture store announced that it was going away. Hardly the only businesses that have closed their doors over the years. What is the bottom for Pine Bluff? Where is this? As we push and push and push in various ways, you still get these closings, which tells me that it's not working. That either it's not working for retail, maybe.
That's what I was about to say.
But the grocery store is a little different animal because you've got to go to the grocery store. You maybe can buy a mattress online. You don't need to go to Haverty's, but it's just a slow leak. I mean, how do you stop that?
I think I've identified it in my priorities broadly, with a focus on youth, economic growth, and safety. As far as retail, I honestly, over the years, I haven't seen a whole lot of focus in terms of recruitment and, programming to foster small business starts, to create an environment to foster that small business activity, whether it's downtown or in different parts of the city, or how do we, repurpose our mall. So I'll start with downtown by saying I think a great opportunity, and this goes back to infrastructure, would be to figure out how do we partner and invest in broadband downtown. I don't know if you've heard, and I'm sure you saw a couple months ago the stories around the copper theft and what that was doing for people and their access. Force. And I have constituents who have home-based businesses who couldn't get on Zoom, who couldn't get online. I had people in my family and other constituents with very critical, internet needs to care for patients, to fill prescriptions, and it was weeks, and it wasn't the fault of AT&T, but I actually since have.
It was their service.
It was their service, but
they didn't have. They
right.
Stole the copper.
Let me tell you, for years, the lobbyists from AT&T would call and ask, hey, can you connect us with your police chief? We've had a problem over here at our facility. So I'm thinking it was local and somebody broke into it. I didn't get a lot of details, but sure, and I would do that. And so to find out years later how serious the problem is, and then here, and I was out of town when there was a city press conference, and hear that AT&T has spent, $250,000. It just begs the question, how do we tap into technology in a way, even if there's an upfront investment, that would make sense so that we don't keep doing this? Because what I found is this problem is lingering. It was a big problem. There was a legislative fix. There were assistant AGs assigned to the problem, to this issue, that worked with the scrap metal businesses, and the problem really dissipated. but it still lingers and is a huge issue here and a huge issue in Southwest Little Rock. And so, you know, how we fix that? Is it a crime problem? Is it a city problem? Is it an AT&T problem? Is it a problem for business? And I would say it's all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say waiting for people to call and say that they don't have internet because of another encounter with copper theft is not the most effective use, I think, of government administration. And it really creates further waste of manpower for AT&T. Now, can we afford to make an investment so that downtown is outfitted with underground copper wiring as well as the fiber optic extensions that we need to tap into the fiber optic lines? I don't know, but I think it's worth the question. And so I think when we talk about technology and innovation, I think that's where our opportunity is, because a downtown where, you know, you have underground and fiber optic internet access, or even, dare I say, free internet, which some downtown developments have looked at and have actually done, has fostered, you know, activity and small business growth, especially in your entertainment district, which I think, you know, we can look forward to in Pine Bluff, which we have. And I know that A&P Commission and Jimmy Cunningham has worked hard on that. I know Go Forward did some work on that. Why wouldn't we fully invest so that we can see a return? Because right now there's no return, right? Right now there's no return. So I hate to say I forgot the question.
Well, we were talking about the loss of business. And,
yeah, okay, so I answered. Yeah.
Is there, kind of in the same vein, is there anything, you know, we have our industrial development arm through the Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything a mayor can do to facilitate, you know, I would say clean industry, bringing clean industry here, or industry here? Can a mayor lean into that?
Yes. I
Have you
think
seen that happening?
I think the same way that we saw Governor Hutchinson, for example, create an infrastructure, a recruitment infrastructure within his administration in collaboration with his economic development secretary and office. You know, I'm not saying we do this, obviously, but I'm giving you an example. Number one, he recruited talent. And got the support of the business community to supplement and provide bonuses so that he could get some of the best talent and minds in economic development leadership. And then they set up relationships and offices in China and recruited all over the world to bring jobs to Arkansas. And I guess what I would say is, and we generated, you know, there were some outcomes because of that investment, because of that work. Then on the other side, you had dollars that were available to assist existing businesses. And what people don't know is a lion's share, I'm going to say 90+% of economic development happens by expanding and assisting your existing pool of businesses. And if we don't do that, and so that we can keep our businesses here, where are we going to get some of your medium-sized and large-scale businesses thinking that we're the place to go, right? So I think that we have to work with the Alliance. We have to work with our state government, especially economic development, especially parks and tourism. We keep talking about, being a tourist destination. People don't know. Do you know that Pine Bluff is like a big bird watching location in the state?
I have a story I could tell you about that. I found there was an awful noise that happened every night when I lived over on Cedar Street.
Yeah.
And so I went out with a Q-beam thing, this huge spotlight, and I found this owl. And it was, I guess, a screech owl, or I forget. And I called, I was a reporter at the time, and so they said, well, call so-and-so. So
Mm-hmm.
I called her up. I came home from work, and there were like 20 people standing in my yard. And they were like, where is it? Because it was a rare, and they said,
wow.
Because you found this rare bird, you get to name it. And I said, I don't want to name.
And you never did?
I didn't name the owl. I don't know why. It's not like I was going to name the species or something, but they got very jazzed about this owl over at 16.
But it's a thing.
It's a thing, yes.
I want to highlight the fact that we have an event that happens every year, Tour de Bluff,
Right.
a cycling conference that started out with just a few people riding, and
They have high hopes.
the
for it.
Fishers are
Yeah.
awesome. Very little investment in that. Very little. We should, whether it is the A&P Commission, the city, the convention center, local business, we should all be investing in that, because people will come here and buy stuff. They will ride their bikes. They will buy stuff. It is, and I'm telling you, I have read in cyclist magazines and in travel magazines, it's a thing. So we have missed opportunities by not investing in what we have here already. And under, a Flowers administration, I think that we would and we could do better. I'll kind of punctuate this tourist destination conversation, because you've heard me talk all the time about, the rhythm and bayous. And by the way, Michael McCrae. Sorry. So it was me, Camara, and Michael McCrae. But
Hey, Michael.
yeah, hey Michael. Our bayou.
Yeah.
We have, first of all, the history of Pine Bluff is also an untapped resource. So you can look all through Alabama and see how they are drawing people there every day, whether you look at the Legacy Institute and what people call the lynching museum. They don't call it that. But, the development there because of that institute and capturing the history, what people don't like to talk about it from all parts of the world. It might be uncomfortable, but it's real and it's rich, and it is an opportunity for us to talk about, see, read, learn about what happened in the past and how not to repeat it, and recognize how far we have come from that. We have that.
We have that.
And we don't tap into it. We don't highlight it. We don't frame it. And we absolutely need to do that. Not just
Jimmy Cunningham do his thing.
We have to let him do his thing.
Then we would have that.
But we have the resources to get a great start. We have it. We just have to not be afraid of it. We have to stop being scared. We have to stop being scared.
We started this actually before we went live talking about, what people expect the mayor to do. And I don't, this question is not that the mayor is the school superintendent, but, one of our areas of concern
Mm-hmm.
is our school system. You know, Whitehall pretty much runs circles around us when it comes to infrastructure. We're building a new high school now. You know, if you're a resident coming to the area, do you come to Pine Bluff for the school system? But we used to be tops. I mean, I started as a reporter back in the 80s. At that time, we were a force with national merit finalists, scholarships, and so forth. Is there anything a mayor can do to help return any of that swagger to the Pineville School District?
Yes. I think that super strong partnerships with the schools are imperative. And I think that the partnerships should be focused on a few things. First and foremost, safety. My dad is a pediatrician, and I think this was like pre-COVID. He had a dad come in with his son, asking my dad what he should do because his son was afraid to go to school. Should I move him? He's afraid of gang violence. He gets bullied.
Went to school in Pine Bluff.
Yeah. And, you know, that is a reality. And I can tell you, you know, sitting in meetings, that we don't do enough as a state to address the issue of bullying in our schools anyway. But when you have the perception and the reality of crime and homicide and kids being afraid, especially young black boys, being afraid, dealing with issues of fear and mortality at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 years old. And so that goes back to, you know, how do we deal with our trauma as a community? Because we forget about that. You know, that's why I don't let anybody call Pine Bluff Crime Bluff without a big challenge and an attitude. It's inappropriate and it's inaccurate. But it also is disrespectful to our people and largely disrespectful to our kids, because by and large our kids are good kids who are trying to make their way in an environment where people call our schools an F, talk about our city. How can they feel proud? So, you know, partnership with the schools is really, really important to figure out how we can make sure that these schools are safe. That there is a presence not against them, but with them to protect them in the school and in the perimeter of those schools, especially when they're coming to school and going home. I think that's really important. And then just partnership with regard to what the city can do with youth. You know, like I said before, we need to regenerate our summer camp with the police department. We have an awesome team of officers who have worked with those kids over the years and are so dedicated to these kids. And I've heard grown people talk about when they were in that camp.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, I mean, they're young grown people, but they're grown people. So the bottom line is, those are a couple of examples. I think last night I talked about part of the youth initiative that I have expressed and committed to creating internships throughout city government. Number one, it provides you, it takes a little work, but it provides you with some assistance. It keeps you young because you're always in an environment where you have young people. We could have a high school and college student working in every office of city government every semester or every year for the full year. And the opportunity for that kid to learn soft skills, to learn specifically the work that's done in that office, to be a part of that process and that progress would be an incredible opportunity to spread access and exposure. I mean, and this goes back to, and I know this works because we did it at UAMS with students who were interested in career fields. And there was, there are a lot of things that you have to do with it to make sure that it's successful. But, young people want to learn. Young people want to know how to do things. But if we're not teaching them, if we're not engaging them, if we're not bringing them forward, no, they're not going to. By the time they get, to be 16 and 17, it's too late to say, hey, and I'm not saying it's too late, write them off, but I'm saying it's too late for you to express interest. They want to be with their friends now. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're thinking about what they're going to do in 2 years. We have an opportunity to capture kids throughout the trajectory of their K through 12 experience to provide them opportunities and exposure. We also could create some partnerships so that there are community center-like facilities and activities in every ward of this city. And it doesn't have to be one per ward. We have churches that have incredible facilities. We have the Boys and Girls Club, and we could have other such entities where the partnerships are possible to work maybe with the state to provide after school and summer opportunities. And in some cases, for some kids, it could be academic safe havens. For other kids, it could be physical safe havens, nutritional safe havens.
Right.
But the resources are out there. How do we work together, right? Prioritize our kids, put these resources to work for our kids. We have to stop paying lip service and talk about how important they are and make them a priority.
So you have mentioned safety several times today, and I've skipped over this question, but I'll go back to it. Do you think Denise Richardson is doing a good job as chief? Are there any other department heads you think should step up their game? And I'm not saying you think that she does, but.
So I will say this. I have met her. Everything that I have asked her for in the way of information or service to a constituent I've gotten. Since I don't serve as mayor and I have not overseen her as chief, I will not give an answer about whether or not she's doing a good job. Has she been responsive to me? Yes. What I will say, because I told you I've been talking to everybody, is I have heard from citizens and constituents who have concerns largely about, and I won't mince words, about the investigation around Maurice Taggart's murder. And honestly, aside from that, and that's not a small aside, but aside from that, I hear nothing but good things. I hear nothing but good things from rank and file police officers and leadership. What I will say is every city department has a leader charged with running those departments. And I'm going to be very clear and specific and say, as mayor, what I would do day one is sit down with every department, or maybe week one, but I would do week one, is sit down with every department leader to talk about his or her department's team, the status of those agencies, the work of those agencies, their plans, their strategic plans, their goals, the resources, and the budget, to make some assessments about where we are and what we need and to form some agreements about what we would need to do in the short and long term to make some improvements in the city, where those, improvements might need to be made. And sometimes improvements might be training. Sometimes it might be tools and resources, equipment. Sometimes it might be funding. Sometimes it might be people. I don't know. But I think that we have to give forethought to how we attract talent, and we can't attract talent if we attack city workers verbally, if we don't compensate city workers, if benefits packages are not attractive, and if we don't give people what they need. And when I say what they need, sometimes it's training, sometimes it is fair, honest, and documented feedback. Because you can't talk about firing people, and I'm saying as a mayor in the office, in the job, if there is not a review of performance.
Right.
And so if you come in and there hasn't been a documented review of performance either, and I know that these are positions that are at will. I mean, we're at will state anyway, and you work, for the pleasure of the mayor.
Right.
But I've seen this on every level of government, and again, you can't attract talent and you can't achieve stability or maintain stability, if your answer to shootings is to fire the chief, when shootings have been a problem for a long time, and your own response has been, quiet and lackluster.
E, do we have questions?
Yes, we got a few.
Okay.
Let me scroll to the beginning.
I'm going to build a little fire.
Now look, when a man is talking about it's cold in here, then something's wrong.
I saw you put your arms down.
Uh-huh.
It was like, maybe I could try that.
It works too.
Maybe they just shut everything off on Fridays.
Bear with me, I'm trying to get them up. Okay, here we go. What will you do to get rid of nepotism, friendship, and kinship when trying to move the city forward? It happens too much in all areas in Palm Bluff City, schools, boards, and commissions.
I agree. I'm going to give some context.
And this is your camera.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to give some context to this. When you are any kind of leader in any environment, whether you run a company or you're an elected official, or whatever, and you have to go into a place and make change, you want your team, you want people you can trust, especially in the arena of politics. So I'm saying this not pretending that leaders don't engage people to do a job who they feel confident can do it because they trust or have seen that person operate in that role in another capacity or with another organization. That said, I feel strongly that in order for us to have a city government that works, that's attractive to business, where people want to live, where it's easy to start a business, and where businesses and communities are supported, we have to have talented people who work hard, who are proud to be in Pine Bluff and who have the resources they need in terms of hiring and making appointments. I will always work to ensure that the people who are hired in city government are people who are qualified to do the job, that treat people with respect. I am an anti-bullying. I just don't believe in that. I don't believe in mistreating people. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's necessary to get a job done. That's how I am. That's who I am. I have worked in an organization where I had to hire people and where I had to make some tough decisions around separation, is what I'll call it. But you have to be committed to the work and the people first. And I think committed, if the commitment is to the people and the work first, if there's transparency and if you're accountable, that means up front you have to say what you're going to do, what you're not going to do in order to be held accountable. I think that people can trust that the decisions that you're making are in the best interest of the city. And that's what I promise to do.
I saw this comment earlier, but now I don't see it. But they asked you, what would you do about the mall?
Ooh, good question. So I've talked a lot about I'm going to look at you because I feel weird. So I've talked a lot with different business leaders about how we could strengthen our economy as a whole. And I think we miss out on a lot when we ignore, and I mentioned this earlier, our four-legged stool of transportation infrastructure. Most cities, large and small, medium, do not boast waterways with a strong port and industrial park, a railroad also attached to an industrial park, air, and interstate. We have all four, which is why the GTL project even located here and is seeking to expand or create a business here. We miss out on a lot by not being able to utilize those resources. And I think that an area of opportunity is expanding our airport. Grider Field, with, I want to say 15-year-old data, if I remember correctly, has a $10 million impact, over $10 million impact, and that was in 2010. So I think it would be fair to expect that it would have increased considerably. And if I had to make a shot in the dark, I would say maybe double since then.
What's that revenue on? Is it renting?
Gas,
hangars,
fuel, airplane stopping and fueling, largely. And I know there is some other repair, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But what it's not based on is commercial flight.
Right.
And it's not based on distribution commerce activity. And I could point to Harrison, Arkansas, that received federal and state assistance, largely federal, to expand their airport to include commercial flight.
Commercial.
Oh, yeah. They have, I'm going to show you. I was ready for this. They have
We almost had
commercial
flights
flights to Dallas, and they advertise their airport as the gateway to the world. Now, what if we were able to start with creating relationships? We already have a UPS here, but creating relationship with a distribution company or companies so that we could really serve as an airport
Right.
for distribution. I mean, in the era now of same day, next day delivery for online retail, which is where retail is going
Right.
for many businesses and many products and services, why wouldn't we figure out a way to create a hub environment so that we could grow business here in that regard? So let's say we were able to establish a relationship with UPS, FedEx, Amazon, or DHL, or a combination over the period of the next few years. 3 miles from the airport is our mall. Malls are being repurposed all over the country for different things, for health resources, for technology resources, for entertainment, training. Now, Dillard's has already, Dillard's was retained because they saw the benefit in creating or morphing their store into a clearance center. Did you know that people travel, and I know this firsthand because I was shopping one time, and I have met several times. I have met people who have traveled from Louisiana and Texas to come to our clearance
My cousin
center,
comes in.
from Northwest Arkansas, and certainly from South Arkansas. So, what would be the opportunity if we negotiated the right kind of if there was the right kind of negotiations around the sale of that mall? And don't ask me about that man, okay? We're not even going to talk about that. But around the sale of that mall, and the buyer was interested in repurposing the mall into a clearance and entertainment center. So other clearance stores, movie theater, which I believe that Stephen Mays Jr. was trying to do. I don't know what happened with that. But what if we supported him in doing that?
You mean instead of building a city-owned theater downtown
Correct.
with tax dollars?
Yes. So what if we supported him in doing that, and the mall became not an outlet mall, but a clearance center for other stores that would place their clearance centers, because the benefit would be to capture the traffic that we're getting with people coming to the Dillard's clearance center. And then we took the big box stores down the street 3 miles away from our airport that now has distribution activity, and attracted some businesses to create a warehouse hub in Pine Bluff. They're doing it in other places. Why can't we do it in Pine Bluff? So that is my thought and vision. I know we're a long way from it, but I know that we could do it. And I know that we can't do anything if we don't first have the vision, bring our people together. Everybody benefits from that. That's win-win. What do you think that would do for that corridor down Harding? How easy would it be with an airport that has some commercial activity, with a mall that has been repurposed with several stores, with a movie theater, with warehouses? Don't you think it would be easy to now get a grocery store down the street?
Well, you would think.
Yeah. And I hear that could be happening, but the job growth just from that in the Harding business corridor would change everything for us. Oh, next question.
Yes. For the sake of time, we'll do one more, and then you can always engage on our platform with, because you have a lot of comments too.
Okay.
So, what will you do about all these houses that are empty and falling in? It makes the city look so bad.
It does. I mean, we've seen some efforts in terms of demolition, and I think that, I think that, I think that that needed to be done.
Or
On the scale that it was, maybe not. I think that we do have great housing stock, but what happens to a home when it's empty is it hastens likely demolition. I think that what the city can do is create incentives for people to purchase homes here in Pine Bluff and actually live in them. I think that with economic development comes a much easier opportunity for housing development. And I'll give you an example. For many years I lived in Little Rock. And I lived in Little Rock, I'm about to age myself, when there was no river market, when the whole river market area, the whole river market, thank you, the whole river market was completely empty, except for La Harpe's office furniture store, the whole area. So there were some abandoned buildings, just largely like different parts of our downtown. It was completely empty. And it first started with the city building the pavilion so that the
did the library come first?
No.
Public library?
No. It was the farmers market which used to be across from where the Women's City Club is now. That was dilapidated and empty. And there's like a parking deck, and on the ground level under the parking deck, farmers used to come and sell vegetables and stuff. They built the pavilion, they built the amphitheater right off the river, which, by the way, y'all, we have a lake. Just a reminder. And it changed everything. Just that. Like, those abandoned buildings were still there. It was only La Harpe's, but people every Saturday would go to the go to the pavilion, because it wasn't even called the River Market yet.
Right.
So people would go buy their fruit and vegetables, and it kind of became the place to go on Saturday. Then eventually the very first business aside from La Harpe was Flying Saucer. That was the very first one. That was still before the Clinton Library.
Not Clinton Library, but the Central Arkansas Library.
And
that was one of the early.
Yeah, that was early too, but that came after as well. Yeah. The library came after the pavilion.
Because when they put the library down there, people were like, what?
Mm-hmm.
But
they had a plan. They had a plan, and I remember it. God rest his soul. Bruce Moore was the city manager. It was still when it was a weak mayor, strong city manager structure. He did. He just passed away, and I was out of town, and he was a friend. He really was responsible for the incredible growth of Little Rock and the downtown development that happened prior to. And his model was Portland. We used to talk about it. His model was Portland, Oregon. And I remember years later, when I ran for state rep, I called Bruce, because I was like, he congratulated me and we did chit chat. And I remember talking to him about our convention center. So as much as I talk about, Pine Bluff Promise, when I first got elected, I was talking about renovation of our convention center and our convention center hotel. He was like, Viv, I don't know if you want to get into that. That's largely a city issue. And it was hard. I stopped talking about it because it was a city issue. But I felt even then that, we have homecoming every year. We have people who come here for conferences. Simmons holds their annual conference here every year. And this is an abomination. It just was horrific. I don't know if you remember when, I think Debbie Hollingsworth was still mayor, and I think I was in office my first term, and I got a call to come down to the hotel. It was walled off from the convention center, and there were people.
I remember when they did that.
There were people who needed housing. There were people who needed emergency housing. They were put in that hotel, and it was deplorable, the condition that the hotel was in, that they would even put people there. So what had once been this hotel where people were hanging out, homecoming, and I think at one time there was a pool in the lobby and there was a restaurant and all these rooms, like there were people chilling in pajamas and house shoes walking downstairs to get some ice. I was like, okay. But and to me, that was a failure of the state and the city to deal with people who needed housing, emergency housing. And it was definitely a failure of the city for us to go into that level of disrepair for our convention center as well as our hotel. And ironically, the convention center in its heyday was led by a guy who ended up going to Hot Springs. And then we had, when I was on the historic, and this was when Mayor Reedus was mayor, I served on the Historic District Commission because my house was in downtown and in the historic part of the city. And there was a guy who was over, I think our planning office. I can't remember. Kind of a big guy.
Husky.
Kind of husky, curly hair a little bit.
Yeah.
And he moved to Hot Springs as well.
No.
I can't remember his name. And it was so long ago. It was when I was 6. But anyway, he's the one that told me about that, and he ended up going to Hot Springs. But he was responsible for the Historic District Commission, like doing the things that we were able to do. And it really started as the Fifth Avenue Historic District Commission, and it expanded to be the Pine Bluff Downtown Historic District Commission. But the bottom line is, this guy left here.
Okay, we have to think of his name because it's bothering me.
Okay, I was gonna look it up.
I should know that.
But he went to Hot Springs, and the gentleman who worked with us on the Historic District Commission went and look at Hot Springs, look at the convention center.
Oh yeah.
And I had seen that, and I was like, why can't we do naming rights? Why can't, just like you see, the Simmons Arena in Little Rock, why couldn't we have a Simmons Arena or a Reliance Arena? Why couldn't we have the Entergy Auditorium? Companies pay for naming rights if that comes along with dollars so that you can, renovate and upgrade to represent that and really highlight that company's name. So why couldn't we renovate our auditorium? We've had some great concerts. I went to the SWV concert a few years ago. I think Eric Benet was there, and there was one more group. But there have been some great concerts, but how do you get people to come when everything is dated and old and your seats are ribbed and there's no hotel to stay in? So if we want to be able to attract concerts, we have to invest. Nobody invites and has parties at their house and it's not clean. At least my mama doesn't, right? So, I think that we can harness our resources and partnerships, and we have a strong presence of industry here and companies that I believe would love to be properly and well represented in this city, and that would give us the platform to engage promoters, to have conferences, family reunions, and concerts right here in Pine Bluff. I don't know about y'all, but I'm sure you're tired of having to travel 40 and 50 miles to go have a nice dinner, to go to the movies, and I think we can still work on that development here. We can still do it.
So, closing remarks. The floor is yours.
Yeah.
Steve Harrison, is this?
Steve Harrison, thank you. Okay, good.
It popped into
I
my
need to
head.
write that down when we shut down. But I'll just say this.
Sorry, Steve.
I never fully talked about myself. And I'll just say this. You can learn more about me by going to votevivianflowers.com, okay? This process and my campaign is about me in that I'm offering myself for service. And I think it's my job to tell you why I believe that I'm the most qualified and I have the strongest vision and that I could bring people together better and all of that. And I'll keep talking about that as we continue, with the candidate forums. But many people know that voters are typically over 65 or over 50, a lion's share of the voters. Those voters and I have and everybody running. We have educations, we have vehicles that are almost paid for, if not paid for. We have homes that are almost paid for and not paid for, and jobs. For me, I'm 11 years from retirement. I could have continued to serve 6 more years in the House of Representatives. I've never had any opposition to speak of. They've been libertarian, and that's not to put them down. I'm just saying in terms of the numbers, I won handily. The only time I had opposition, that person decided to get out of the race, and that was the first election. So I say that to say I could have run, and I made a decision not to run for re-election because I see the need here in the city. I'm offering myself to serve, not for me. I have a small business. I've been, in the last year, offered a job where I could be making a lot of money and walk away from service. But it's in my blood. I love my city. I love the people. I love this work. I got an education so that I could do this work because I love it. And I know that I could help make a change with other leadership and with the people. We as a nation, as a state, as a city, pay a lot of lip service to our young people. We have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to put our work where our mouth is. We can't keep talking about these kids and we are not serving them. We are not providing them the resources. We are not, as a community, raising them up. And whether they're K through 12, whether there are 24 through 40. We can't keep expecting them to wait on opportunity, and we're not mentoring them. We're not bringing them in so that they can learn how to serve as servant leaders, how to serve on boards and commissions, how to serve as corporate leaders. We can't keep not doing that and expect our city to grow, expect our city to be a place where people want to come. We have to focus on our young folks with almost reckless abandon. It is an emergency. That is as important as dealing with the gun violence. And it really overlaps with dealing with the gun violence. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was, we learned a lot about you today. I appreciate that. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Eplunus Colvin, for making this happen.
Thank you. Yes.
And you said that she had a lot of comments
Yes,
on there.
so you
Okay.
can go back and, engage and
I will.
respond as you see fit. So,
Thank you. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
everybody who participated. I know this was long, especially young people. I know we probably had about 2 young people, if anybody, because they get on.
You held a steady audience, and remember, people
Okay.
at work, they'll
Yeah.
come back this evening and watch, and
Okay,
all through the
good.
weekend, so yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll see y'all at the next one.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Will.